I never believed in fairy tales, but what happened to me was something far darker and far more beautiful than any story ever written. It all began that night at the restaurant. All around us, the air was thick with celebration. People were laughing, glasses were clinking. But I felt only a cold shiver that seemed to settle in my very bones. Alexander, the man I loved more than life itself, sat across from me with a face so grim it looked as though he had just signed my death warrant. "We need to break up," he said. The words hit the table like a lead weight in the silence of our conversation. I stared at him, and the world began to blur at the edges. At that moment, I didn't know the secret he was guarding. I didn't understand why he was shattering my heart so ruthlessly, right when I was ready to promise him my forever. Even the waitress, appearing with a complimentary bottle of champagne for couples in love, felt like a cruel joke. Alexander dismissed her sharply, his voice unrecognizable, hollow, distant, and ice cold. He started talking about my future, saying I was young, that I needed financial security, someone who could provide for me, not a poor writer like him. It was absurd. I cried out that I didn't care about money, that I was willing to walk away from my father's fortune, even that house on the coast he suddenly mentioned. But Alexander remained unyielding. He simply stood up and walked out, leaving me alone with my tears and a glass of wine that had turned to ash. But he forgot his jacket. It was a sign. I knew where he lived, though I had never stepped foot inside his apartment. My feet moved on their own, leading me toward that old, brooding building. As I entered the hallway, every shadow felt alive, reaching out. On the stairs, I encountered an old woman with snow-white hair and eyes that looked like cracked glass. She grabbed my arm with skeletal fingers, and her touch was freezing. "Which apartment is Alexander's?" I asked, but she only stared through me. At that moment, the door creaked open, and there he was. Alexander was furious. "I told you never to come here!" he hissed, pulling me inside. But the second I crossed the threshold, the breath left my lungs. The apartment was a sanctuary of the impossible, crammed with antique furniture, paintings worth millions, and ancient books. The windows were sealed shut with thick, heavy curtains. "Are you a thief? Where did all this come from?" I whispered, my eyes darting across the room. He looked at me for a long time, his gaze heavy with the weight of centuries, and then he spoke the words that changed my universe forever. "I've been collecting these things for the last 100 years, Zoe. The tape on the windows, it helps me hide from the sun. Because I am a vampire." I wanted to laugh, I wanted to run, but his eyes, they glowed with an otherworldly light. He confessed that he knew my every thought and dream, but that he could never give me a normal family life. I refused to believe it. I provoked him, calling him a liar. "Then bite me! Do it!" I screamed, hysterical with grief and confusion. His face transformed, fangs sharpening before my eyes as he pinned me against the wall. In that heartbeat, I felt a paralyzing terror, but beneath it, an undeniable magnetic pull. I fled. I tried to lose myself in the noise of a crowded bar with friends, listening to their toasts for my freedom from a broke boyfriend. My girlfriends tried to sell me on the idea of a wealthy life, a queen on a ranch, but Alexander's voice was the only thing playing in my head. I looked at the sweating, shouting crowd and realized I didn't want a normal life. I didn't want the ranches or the boring stability of a human man. I wanted my Alexander. I wanted my vampire. Later that night, I found myself back on that same dark street. A drunk stranger cornered me, shoving me against a brick wall, his breath foul and his hands rough. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then I heard a sickening crack and a muffled groan. Alexander was there. He held the man by the throat with effortless strength, finally showing me his true, lethal nature to keep me safe. We stood in that narrow alley, and he tried to push me away one last time. He told me my life would never be the same if I stayed. "Would you even give up a house on the sunny coast for me?" he asked, searching my face. "Then we'll go to Alaska," I replied with a faint smile. "It's night for half the year there. No sun at all. You'll love it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring box I had seen that first night. The diamond caught the stray light of a street lamp, reflecting 1,000,000 tiny stars in its depths. "Zoe Jones, I promise to love you forever. Will you marry me?" I knew I wasn't a vampire. I knew I couldn't live forever. Yet. But I looked into his eyes and understood that eternity isn't a length of time. It's the way we feel about each other in this very second. "I do," I whispered. "Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, and our lips met in a kiss that tasted of shadows and infinity. Alexander promised me that we could fix my mortality. And you know what? I'm not afraid, because a love like this is worth giving up the sun for.